Oi oi, it's your boy, the Nasruddin Imavov of slagging these fights off, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you on Monday the 10th of June, following a big weekend of fights. Not like massive fights themselves, but every major organisation in MMA had a fight on this weekend. Spare Bellator, but they're PFL. UFC, ONE, Rising, KSW, Octagon, PFL brackets, Europe. You even had Glory doing some fat boy kickboxing that I've not watched yet. But there was a lot on. And while the UFC event was not spectacular, it was serviceable. Had some okay fighters on it. And there's some stuff to talk about. But I like to open with a positive story from combat sports worldwide. And I think today I'm going to start with the Octagon Lightweight Grand Prix. Octagon is a show that does massive stadiums in Europe. I think it's based in Germany, ? They've got a clever thing going because the term octagon referring to the UFC's cage is trademarked. As I think it was Mauro in Strikeforce, he was like, chasing him across the octagon. I mean cage. I hope I don't get sued for that. The great thing about Octagon, the company, spelt with a K, is that they can say, so-and-so quickly takes the center of the octagon cage and not get sued for it. And the even funnier thing is that their cage is circular. But they are putting up these amazing numbers in these amazing stadium shows, so good for them. Not too many fantastic fighters out there at the moment, but they are doing a lightweight tournament, and it is $1 million prize or €1 million prize. And those are always great because they do bring in talent. And if there's a division worldwide where there's going to be plenty of talent outside the UFC, it's going to be lightweight, maybe bantamweight. But lightweight is chock-a-block worldwide. So they got 16 guys to fight in the tournament. There's been some interesting guys in it. But the standout for me so far has been Akoidan Duque, a 37-year-old Spanish dock worker who is doing way better than he has any right to, or rather looking way better than he has any right to. He fought like the biggest guy in the tournament in the first match and used grindy old man wrestling to keep putting him down, and then occasionally chinned him with this amazing left hook that came out of nowhere. Then this time he got this lad called Mohamed Muchayev, who is 14-1, fighting out of Austria, amazing-looking prospect. He's like 24 years old, really fast. They used him to beat up Makwan Amakani in their last event, which is what you do if you want to make someone a star, give him an old UFC name to beat up. And he was looking phenomenal. And then he met Duque, and Duque did some lovely old man boxing, just pressured him down, kept squaring up and doing the high cover on his right side and coming back with the left hook, right uppercut, left hook, kept catching him, kept moving him back, kept threatening to wrestle, and he outworked him and used his noggin to win. And it was quite interesting because the other, I think we're in the quarterfinals now, the other tournament fight on this card was Mateusz Legursky versus Akon Oneless, and Oneless is a massive lightweight. He's 6'1", I think, and he's from Renegade MMA. He's a teammate of Leon Edwards. And he comes out swinging very fast, and he gets first-round stoppages, typically. And Legursky did a great job of working him out and just using his own rounded game to deal with this guy's massive explosive power and size. He's catching kicks, turning them into easy takedowns, kicking to get kicks back, clinching up when Wonders started swinging or letting him fall short and countering. He just showed a little bit of everything. And that's what Dusuke's been doing too. It's these two guys who aren't spectacular, but do have enough skills to make these guys who have physical attributes and are looking like prospects look bad. So well worth a watch. Hope he wins the Millie. In the UFC, we had the curse of the new gloves. It got up to, I think it was 18 fights in a row with no stoppages or no TKOs or KOs. And then Fernando Prates broke the seal with a knockout of Charles Radke, but he did it with a kick to the body. So it was another 4 fights until there was a knockout by punch. That was Zach Reese against Julian Marquez. And then they had a couple more on that card. So it was... I just find it funny. I don't think this is an actual curse. I cannot see a way that reducing the weight of the gloves by an ounce and slightly changing the shape could completely prevent knockouts. I mean, maybe people don't feel as comfortable. If they can't ball their fist right, they're not going to throw it as hard. But I struggle to see that being the issue. Maybe people being unfamiliar with the gloves if they didn't send it out to all the fighters beforehand to train in. It's more that it's very funny that happened. Especially because that the UFC, they do things that like aren't really a change at all, but they pay a ton of money for some kind of consultant to tell them about it and have the idea. Like probably about 5 or 6 years ago, they changed their logo. They announced it as UFC Updates logo. And what they did was they shaved the corners off the C, and they paid a firm $2 million to do it. But we aren't noticing a downtick in eye pokes, but they never said that was the purpose. They just wanted new gloves. Oh, and we didn't talk about it last week, but the bloody letters on the back of the glove that say UFC, they wore off. So Islam Makhachev standing there doing his post-fight interview with the letters peeling off his glove in front of the camera. Great work, UFC, always. Main event, Nassourdine Imavov, Jared Cannonier. I thought this was actually quite interesting. Of the middleweights that I don't want to see fight, these are probably some of the better ones, actually. I quite like Imavov for his style and roundedness and of striking. And Jared Cannonier is smarter than he gets credit for. And I really liked him back in the day when he was like a light heavyweight who was just training part-time. He was working as a luggage carrier, training up in Alaska with no one of note. And he came in and he fought Glover Teixeira when Glover Teixeira was like a serious title contender. And Glover Teixeira was the man who just sparked everyone with his hands, and everyone was scared of him. And Jared Cannonier had him diving after legs desperately. And then he moved to Arizona to train with the MMA Lab, which is a proper team full of proper fighters for him to train with. And he made the simultaneous cut down to middleweight. And I remember saying at the time, that's a lot. He's going to have trouble with that. And he's looked, honestly, pretty great since then. He's looked better than he has throughout his entire career. Someone was saying, like, he is below Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker. He's probably skill-wise the standout middleweight of this generation. And I say this generation, I think we mean like last generation. They're sort of heading into the rear view mirror now. Cannonier's getting old. How old is he? I think he's 41. No, he's just 40, but that's still pretty old. Even at middleweight, they don't let you hang around that long. But there were some interesting dynamics at play in this fight. Imavov wasn't really kicking much, which was quite a surprise because his kicking game has been a big strength of his. I thought when Cannonier switched to southpaw, he'd be looking for that little twist kick into the gut, the outward front kick. Instead, this was mainly a hands-based performance. He was either throwing 1-2s and jabs, or checking both hands and looking to turn over elbows and things like that. Cannonier had some success with his low kicks, which he's always been pretty good with since the Anderson Silva fight back in the day. And honestly, I thought he had some decent success entering. He was having a bit of trouble because Imavov was using rangy, straight-hitting weapons and checking his hands as well. And I liked that Jared Cannonier would take a step left or right and then attack, or he'd feint and then take a step left or right and then attack. And that's what you've got to do. If a guy's set up, ready to blast you as you come down the middle, you've got to make him adjust. You've got to make him turn slightly. You've got to make him flinch. And then you've got to go. And honestly, I was just thinking how well he was doing it when he immediately got cracked with the counter in the 4th round and ended up getting stopped off it. Controversial stoppage, obviously, but I thought really good counter. He didn't do himself any favors by jogging out. You know, this was a thing, like, in this fight, people were like, that's just resetting. But obviously, if John Jones does it back in the day, people are like, that's running and that's cowardice. Carlos Condit does it against Nick Diaz. That's running and that's cowardice. But if your favorite fighter does it, it's resetting position. Obviously, banned in boxing, you'll get penalized for that, or you get told off badly because it's turning your back. It's a show of timidity. And of course, like, there's no targets on the back of the body that are legal. So you're kind of doing you're removing yourself from the fight. You're saying, like, I don't want to fight anymore. I'm not giving you any targets. But it did seem like Cannonier still had wits about him and could throw back. I will say there was a lot of holding from Cannonier that didn't really achieve much in this fight, and that was hammered home by the fact that the UFC brought up the stat clinch control time, a stat which means fucking nothing. You're not supposed to be scored on holding a clinch. You're not supposed to be scored on not doing damage in a clinch. Honestly, it is the least significant difference in position, having like the over-under, being the man with the other guy pushed to the cage, or you being in the middle of the cage, because at any time he could turn you around. I mean, not at any time, but like if you're just clinging to that, if you won't open up with strikes because you're scared of being turned around, you don't deserve anything from there. It was honestly very reminiscent of Imavov versus Roman Dolidze last time. Dolidze would get him to the fence, couldn't take him down, didn't want to risk striking because then he'd circle out. So Dolidze just held. And you're going, what are you doing? I mean, granted, you get twice the money if you win that you do if you lose, so you might as well hold on and hope judges are scoring it for you. And funnily enough, in the Dolidze fight, one judge, Ronald McDonald Carthy, scored it for Dolidze. Oh, no, scored it a draw. He gave Dolidze 3 rounds because Imavov had a 10-8, which was crazy. There are not 3 rounds in that fight you can give if you've ever seen a fight before. I did like how Imavov was breaking from clinches. It was slow work, but he'd get an overhook and the forearm under the neck on the other side, and he'd start walking back, like trying to moonwalk out the side, and Cannonier would press back into him, and he'd switch him over so that his other hand was underneath Cannonier's chin. The hand under the chin, so powerful. You watch people like Tai Tuivasa does it a lot. There's loads of guys do it. I just can't think of any off the top of my head, but hand underneath the jaw and push up is still, I mean, this appears in like old Chinese martial arts texts, and it's still so powerful. If a guy is chest to chest with you in the clinch and you get your hand under his jaw and you can force it up, you can, you can possibly break the clinch, but you can certainly pummel your way back in, get your head back inside his. And it does lift them up in line to a big elbow. If you release the overhook and whip the elbow over the top, that's really nasty too. So Imavov moves forward. I mean, he should probably get like some kind of title fight soon. I don't think he had a big loss, did he? He just had the close decision against Strickland. Oh, no, he lost the close decision to Strickland. Sorry, he had a no contest against Chris Curtis. That's the controversy I'm thinking about. But he was, making Curtis look terrible. I would count that as a win, so he's got 3 on the trot. You could rematch him with Strickland, and I wouldn't watch. Or you could move him into title contention, because honestly, what else is going on in that division? You just got bigger Strickus waiting for challengers. Oh man, he was supposed to fight Alaskrov a while ago. That would have been a good fight. Alaskrov has now just had another cancellation and is fighting someone we've never heard of. Antonio Tricoli, coming off a win at Brazilian Fighting Series 3. Also coming off a win that was overturned on the Contender Series due to a failed drug test. Oh my God. Next weekend we got Josh Quinlan fighting. That dude won on the Contender Series, failed the drug test for that fight, so that was a no contest. They still gave him his UFC debut, which is fair enough. They probably had a contract signed. And he pulsed positive for a completely different drug in that time. They said, it's not a large enough amount to be a violation, but it's a different drug to the one that he already tested positive for. And now he's 1-2 in the UFC and got badly knocked out last time, and they're still giving him fights. It's like, I would have cut this dude the moment that he had a loss, and I could justifiably do it without legal ramifications. But he looks good getting off the bus, and that's the point. Elsewhere on the UFC card, Dominic Reyes got one back in the win column, which was great. We talked about how it's good that he took some time off. It was almost 2 years since the Ryan Spann loss, where he basically got put out by a jab, which is crazy. Jacoby, not a thunderous puncher, and he won't go after you murderously either. He's very measured and methodical, and he found out about the calf kick, and now he just does it almost in lieu of everything else. He noticed that Dominic Reyes was southpaw, so about halfway through the round, he switched to southpaw and started throwing calf kicks there. He ran Dominic Reyes to the ropes. Did I say Cruz before? He ran Dominic Reyes to the cage, and he opened up on him, and he was doing all right. But literally, you could see Dominic Reyes steps off to his left and throws the left hand, and that's the counter he's been doing his whole career. He's a southpaw. He steps back and to the left, and he throws his left hand over the top, and he's knocked out everyone with it. And I think Jacoby had stepped into southpaw to pursue him too. So it wasn't like he was throwing it on the open side. It's just that Jacoby was squaring up, throwing punches, and Reyes stepped off and threw the counter, perfectly knocked him out. Perfectly knocked him down. And then they did an interview with him afterwards, and you realised how absolutely massive this dude is. If he can stop getting chinned, he's big, he's athletic, he throws a great left-hand counter, he's a southpaw, he wrestles all right. There's still a place for him here. Light heavyweight is full of guys who have 3-fight finishing slumps, as in they get finished 3 times, and then they're done, and then they come back, and they're in title contention. Sad for Jacoby, he's my boy. If you don't like excitement at light heavyweight, he's your man. he's a bit boring sometimes, but he's a thinking man in a division full of meatheads, and often he just gets out meatheaded. It's quite sad, but then he does do meatheaded things like attempt takedowns when he's winning the round on the feet. Raul Rosas versus Ricky Tercius went about as everyone expected it to. Ricky Tercius is at his best when he's on the bottom getting his ass kicked. He has some wonderful X-guard and butterfly work, and he showed that against Raul Rosas. Rosas got the early takedown. Tercius got in the X-guard. I think did he scramble up from there? He ended up on Rosas' back, started trying to squeeze him over the chin. Got that chin. Couldn't get it. Ended up on the bottom in the second round. Got choked himself. I mean, honestly, not that bad. Ricky Tercius, I don't really like his fights a lot of the time. It's a lot of volume to not much threat. It's kind of, yeah, it's like back in the day when people used to go about some kind of, I don't know, Diego Sanchez, Clay Guida. These guys are banging, and it's like, but neither of them can actually stop a fight with their punches. They don't have any power. What am I watching? I'm just watching activity for activity's sake. And Tertius is a lot like that, but when he's put on the bottom, he has a really entertaining guard and escapes from the bottom. And Raul Rosas, he had that slip against Christian Rodriguez. I think I need to see him against a better rounded fighter, to be honest, because Christian Rodriguez, probably the first inkling of a rounded fighter that he'd met. And also I think he missed weight, didn't he, for that one? But in that fight, Rosas is just like running after the takedowns with his head down. And it's like, I've seen you do better than that. This guy has clearly got you spooked. So I want to see him in against someone who could strike and wrestle and see if it all goes to pot for him. Bruno Ferreira, Dustin Stoltzfus. Do you know what? Dustin Stoltzfus actually looked pretty good in the first round of this, I thought. Oh, he got knocked out in the first round, but in the first couple of minutes of this. Do you know what? I'm noticing a lot of fighters in MMA using like a light lead leg and throwing out some teeps and things occasionally now. It's really interesting. I think it's probably because everyone's so worried about the calf kick, they've had to get a little bit lighter on their lead leg. But Stoltzfus was looking Lumpini ready for a little bit of this fight. He was cornering Bruno Ferreira. Some fun grappling exchanges in this one. There's a moment when Ferreira turtles and Stoltzfus is on the side of him. And Ferreira reaches out and grabs that hand that's over the shoulder, pulls it over to the other side of his head, and tries to like break Stoltzfus' arm on his neck in comic old school martial arts style. You know, that one where you lift the guy's arm up and you break it over your shoulder. He's trying to do that from the bottom. And Stoltzfus smartly got his hands together and started looking for that arm in guillotine / seated katagatame. The one that Jack Hermanson used to do all the time, where you put their arm and head on the same side of your body and you choke with both involved. And you choke with both in the loop. But Stoltzfus ended up going over the top of him from there, getting a decent bite on a leg at one point. But Ferreira rolled and was able to use his foot on the butt to get his knee line free. And then Stoltzfus just sort of runs at him on the feet. And where Stoltzfus had been having success was sort of like slowly closing down the space on Ferreira, moving him back to the fence. And then Ferreira would make a big swing off the fence and Stoltzfus would counter him. And it worked really well. But once they come up off the mat, Stoltzfus just runs at him. And it means that Ferreira can get off some elbows, and then there's spinning back elbow, which, like, the spinning back elbow only works if there's a boundary at your back stopping you from moving, or you're moving in on them. If you just put someone on the fence and they try and spinning back elbow you and you aren't running onto it, they're in real trouble. But I said this when Ferreira fought Robocop. I was like, he's a deeply flawed fighter. I mean, Robocop should be able to do this. And then Robocop looked all right for a bit, and then he just got bonked. I like Ferreira a lot. He does. It's like the Phil Hawes one. It's not that he's just wild. He does see things. Like he saw Phil Hawes dropping his head, so he hit him with a knee off the lead leg. It's just that his mechanics are shit, and when he's on the lead, he's very counterable. Zachary's knocked out Julian Marquez in a fight that doesn't even need to be commented on because it went so short. Puna Soriano versus Miguel Baeza. I said on Twitter that this is proof that if you leave the middleweight division and go down, you stop being an uncoachable meathead. Because Puna Soriano is from that camp with Nick Sick, where he's got all those middleweights who are contenders, and every time they fight, you see him in their corner asking them to do like the most basic shit, and they won't or can't. They do what they do. They can't do anything. Like they cannot adapt at all to what Nick Sick's asking them to do. And Puna Soriano, I would put in that camp until he came down here and started using his wrestling again. It was brilliant. He was in love with his left hand for a very long time in the UFC. I think he wrestled in the Contender Series and then just knocked out a guy and was like, right, I'm a banger now. But Baeza's had some rough luck. He's lost quite a few lately, and he's also had long breaks due to injury. He was a prospect at one point. He knocked out Matt Brown, old Matt Brown, but still Matt Brown. And he was looking promising, and then lost the decision to Ponzinibbio, got knocked out by Chaos Williams in the third, and then it's just been a series of cancellations pushing his career back and back and back. That Chaos Williams knockout was in 2021, and he's had like one fight since then before this. But you got to see in this one, leg locks not working in MMA again. we talk about this every week, but leg entanglements are good for slowing people down, but then just come up on top, mate. Just use them to sweep, because Baeza got the 50-50 entanglement here, which is where you both have one leg across the opponent's leg and across their body. So you can both attack the heel hook. And you got to see, like, back in the day, when Ryan Hall was first starting to use the 50-50 and it was just sort of breaking out as a no-gi position. It was a big gi position because it was like you could sweep a guy, hold him in the 50-50 and sort of scramble your way on top, but stay in the 50-50 and you'll get an advantage. And then as long as you stay on top of that 50-50, you win the match. Gilbert Burns, while he may be like one of the most exciting fighters in the welterweight division now, that's his penance for basically inventing the 50-50 gi meta and making gi jiu-jitsu incredibly boring for quite a few years. But back in the day when Ryan Hall was just starting to do it, the 50-50 heel hooks and things, you didn't need to, you would get the heel in the 50-50 and you could finish him straight from there. Nowadays, and Ryan Hall found this too, like quite soon after starting to work with the 50-50, you know, I think on his first 50-50 DVD, he teaches this too, but like, you've got to get something in front of their body. You've got to move your legs around so that there's something in front of their body so you can put more pressure on this heel hook. Otherwise, they can just, you know, sometimes it's just you won't get enough pressure even. Other times they can just reach out and grab your elbow and slip it off their heel. But you saw Baeza had the heel exposed. He was cranking it as hard as he could, and he just couldn't get enough torque on it to actually cause some damage. And Puna Soriano is a tough bastard. He's not, I mean, everyone at this level is a tough bastard. They're not going to tap because they're scared of you breaking their knee. They're going to tap when you break their knee or dislocate or tear the tendons in it or whatever it is that happens inside when we go Mortal Kombat vision. And there are a few moments in this fight where I thought Baeza was doing interesting jiu-jitsu stuff. Like he gets thrown to the turtle and he reaches out and overwraps Soriano's far leg and then rolls through to recover guard. But then he spent the whole time just getting beaten up. Actually, the way that he entered the 50-50 was the same way that Mikey Musumeci entered his leg entanglement this weekend. K-guard along the fence. K-guard generally is so powerful. Along the fence is not as powerful because, you know, the fence is a complicating factor in all guard play. But yeah, you can still get it from there. Unfortunately, he then spent the second round trying to replicate that position and just getting punched in the head. A lot of arguments that this fight should have been stopped by his corner. I mean, it's hard. If you've not earned any money from this in 3 years, and the difference between winning and losing is 50% of the purse, or rather you get 100% more if you win, then of course people are going to do stupid things and try and win. I think that concludes the good part of the card. I was disappointed that Daniel Marquez's fight was not better. I enjoyed it, but... Oh, and I enjoyed Castaneda almost chinning him at the end, but I do like Daniel Marquez. He just didn't really shine in this fight. I suppose it's because it was a better opponent than he's used to. Castaneda is a very experienced hand in this game. But yeah, the rest of that card was fairly mid. Elsewhere in MMA, what should we do? Should we do one? One is not strictly MMA. One is mainly not MMA. But they did have an interesting MMA debut. They had Cade Ruotolo taking his first fight in MMA. And good for him. He came out kind of like Gary Tonin when he took his debut in one. He came out striking and he looked confident there. I wouldn't say he looked great. I would say he looked confident, and that's half the battle. Fabricio Verdum had everyone convinced that he was a really good kickboxer when all he did was pump 1-2s. And because he was confident, the opponent would cover up and he'd be allowed to throw like 4-punch combinations. Big kick on the end. But Cade Ruotolo did some nice stuff here, throwing some punches and grabbing the double collar tie, using his lanky-ass body in lanky-ass ways. Chased the back, got the back, finished by rear naked choke. It was all, you know, all good. It was weird seeing Cade Ruotolo with his hair in braids because he's normally got the full fro, and that's always bouncing around. And, you know, when I see people with long hair, you know, young dudes with long hair in jiu-jitsu, I'm just like, that must really hurt all the time. Anytime someone gets their knee on it when you're on the bottom, trying to, you know, scramble out of positions. Anytime someone collar ties you and they don't even need to grab, but they'll just pull their hand back or you clear their hand and they'll take a load of hair with them. But enjoy it while you're young, I suppose, because it's just going to get torn out on the mats anyway, probably, and you'll start balding as you get older. Mikey Musumeci submitted Gabriel Sosa, which was probably the most interesting match on this card. Mikey has been too small for the 66 kilo division of ADCC. Gabriel Sosa has been effective in the under 66 kilo division in ADCC. And Mikey winning this match quite convincingly and easily and quickly gives him a good argument. I mean, ADCC is currently in turmoil because the Craig Jones Invitational is stealing half the talent, but it would be nice to see Mikey in some of these no-gi tournaments. It's just been great to see Mikey in no-gi anyway, because he was a gi guy for such a long time. He's got an incredible eye for detail, and I've watched probably more of his crazed autistic rambling about jiu-jitsu than most people alive. BJJ Fanatics let me have a lot of his instructionals, and they are hours and hours and hours on single positions. and him talking just crazy stuff about like, put your foot on the ASIS bone, not just generically on the hip. You want to get the bone. Put your hand on his collarbone. You don't want to get the shoulder. You want to get the collarbone, and stuff like that. And honestly, it works really well if you start trying to apply it. He's a very clever guy, jiu-jitsu wise. But he called out Baby Shark, Diego Hayes, and Diego Hayes came back and was like, I mean, the whole thing was cringe. Mikey went off his meds in the post-fight rant. He said, take your steroids and come and face me. And Diego Hayes won ADCC and thanked his endocrinologist on the mats. So it's not exactly secret that he's on a ton of drugs, but his response was to be like, Mikey wins bitch ass tournaments or whatever. And Mikey won the Worlds in the gi, which Diego Hayes didn't win. So it's just like, what are you doing, bro? You entered these tournaments and lost. The whole thing, I mean, jiu-jitsu trash talk is so cringe. It's all like, I'm going to fight you. And then it's like, but we're not going to punch each other, right? Honestly, Mikey and Rodtang are the only people in one's good graces, maybe Superlek, but Mikey is the only guy getting consistently paid by one. And I'm so happy for him because of that. But it just, every single video one puts up is like, is this the toughest nerd in the world? And it's Mikey Musumeci in his glasses. And then the next one is like, is this the hottest fighter in the world? And it's Itsuki Hirata weigh-in picture. And fair enough, she might be, but she's not very good. And they do use it every single week. The rest of that card was like kickboxing stuff, which was fun. Tawanchai versus Natawat. I thought Natawat did a much better job than I expected. I've been laughing at Joe Natawat being a jobber for a long time. And he actually, I mean, this is his second fight with Tawanchai, and he actually gave a really good account of himself. If you want to, if you're not familiar with Tawanchai, you want to watch him for the lead leg side teep. He's got one of those. He's got one of those Sam Art teeps, and he's got an awesome. Like he's a southpaw. He's got an awesome left leg. Punts people everywhere. Like whatever is in the way, he'll try and break it. If you try and check it, he'll try and break it. He's just a nutter. Rodtang had a fairly entertaining fight against Dennis Puric, and then Sidichai beat Masaki Noiri, and it really was like. You see it quite a lot. I mean, it's kind of what happened to Takeru versus Superlek, and it's kind of what happened to a lot of guys when they fought Borkow back in the day. In a lot of Thai fights, there's this section of the fight, normally in like the first couple of rounds, where they are just standing in front of each other, rocking backwards and forwards, threatening to bring up the teep. And in Japanese kickboxing, the teep is like, it does exist, but it's like, I'm going to front kick you in the body now. Whereas in Muay Thai competition in the stadiums, it's like, oh, I poked you with my teep and you came a little bit off balance. Oh, it's all this like cheeky boy trying to slightly off balance people stuff. And honestly, when you get a guy who wants to just open up in combinations on you like Masaki Noiri and do awesome hitting, and you poke him in the body with the teep, you're not hurting him, but you are breaking that combination. And he had a lot of trouble with that in the early going. Just the jabs and the turning and the teep. And then the rear leg high kick because that's what Sidichai does. He just pounds your arm. I was laughing about some guy saying Soviet boxing is the best base for MMA earlier, and I've now just made a generalization about Thai style Thai style Muay Thai and Japanese style kickboxing. But obviously, there are all kinds of fighters wherever you go. In the Soviet Union, everyone was not fighting the same way. It's a huge tract of land, and they had in-fighters, out-fighters. One of the most successful boxers from the Eastern Bloc ever was Laszlo Papp, who I was raving about a little while ago. I finally sat down and watched some of his fights, and he fights like he swings like Rocky Marciano, and he's got a little bit of like Lomachenko in there, which is really weird. And he's southpaw doing weird footwork with his legs bowed like he's sitting on a horse. That's not the classical Soviet boxing Olympic team style. But places do develop their own sort of little quirks, due to how judges value fights over there. If you're in Thailand, obviously the rules are different in Muay Thai to kickboxing. If you're somewhere like Mexico, people are fighting for money from very early on, so they don't really have a robust amateur system. But because people are fighting for money, there's a big emphasis on entertainment. So that whole like Mexican style, go forward, do or die thing is sort of encouraged in local competition. But you do have to be careful being like, that's the Soviet style, that's the Thai style, that's the Mexican style. It's like Roberto Duran, when he became famous, he's a Panamanian. There had been Panamanian boxers before him, but like the previous two most successful Panamanian boxers were known as these like defensive savants who stayed out on the side and stayed very safe. And Duran was known as this forward-going smashing machine who was likened more to Mexican boxers. Anyway, anything else on that one card that was interesting? Don't think so. Anything? Oh, PFL Europe happened. PFL Europe and PFL MENA and stuff like that, they're kind of crap. But on PFL Europe, it was, I'm going to give you a moment that you should watch from this. Jack Grant, who fought in Cage Warriors, I think he was a Cage Warriors champion, but he fought Jai Herbert. And it was like the winner was going to get to the UFC. And Jai Herbert won and got to the UFC. And Jack Grant lost and ended up sort of just shopping his skills around Europe and Britain. In his last one, he fought Abduragimov, the Lazy King, in PFL Europe 1. And he made the Lazy King, who was incredibly highly touted, he made him look very bad and should have won the decision. But the judges were like, no, we work for PFL. But this time he came out against Charlie Leary. His striking's always been terrible, but Charlie Leary got in his face. He grabbed a collar tie, started swinging uppercuts and hooks, hockey punch style, Don Fry Takayama style. And then he snuck around behind Charlie Leary and he suplexed him on his head. And then he pounded on him for the stoppage. It's the coolest finish you will see all week, probably. Suplex to punches. You can never get enough suplex to punches, in my opinion. Though, the dude who fought Makwan Amikani on this week's Octagon, I believe he'd already lost to my boy Duque, but he went 3 rounds with Makwan Amikani, which is already cheating because Makwan Amikani only has 1 round of gas in him. But in the 3rd round, Makwan Amikani goes in for a takedown along the fence. The guy grips his hands through underneath the crotch and over the back, gotched pile driver style, picks him up for the gotch pile driver, which of course is a pro wrestling move and totally illegal in MMA because it's spiking someone on their head. But as Amikani lets go, he sort of flips him so he lands on his back, and then he runs around onto Amikani's back and chokes him. Very cool. Go watch the finish to that. In fact, watch all Amikani's losses, just because. Octagon, I gave it a watch because I'm trying to give them a chance, but I thought their lightweight tournament was really interesting. Other stuff on the main card, not so much. Their main event was Carlos Vermola versus Attila Vey. These guys fought like 5 years ago. It was Vey's last fight, I believe. He knocked out Vermola and moved on, and Vermola then went on and won the title and became a big thing for Octagon. Vermola's since lost the title, but they wanted to do this matchup. Vey came back from retirement. Apparently, the first fight made him a big deal in Slovakia, where he's from. He was the first Bellator heavyweight champion. I think the first Bellator light heavyweight champion. So back in Bjorn Rebney days, this guy was winning in Bellator. Very old and long in the tooth now. Obviously retired once already. Honestly gave a pretty good account of himself, but Vermola just smashed through him, and by the 2nd round, he got the arm triangle of the finish. Worth noting because I thought it was really cool that at the end, Vermola left 1 glove in the cage. He retired, he left 1 glove in the cage and gave 1 glove to Attila Vey, saying that, like, if you want to do the trilogy at any point in the future, I'll come back for that. I just thought that was a really nice touch, a nice spin on the classic retirement. And if they don't want to do the trilogy, of course, that's a really nice gesture for your rival. And then if you haven't watched it, you won't have watched it probably because it's hard to get a hold of if you don't have the Rising streaming service. What I'm saying is there's nowhere to get Russian Link, brother, online for Rising. They're very effective at shutting that shit down. Something very funny about Rising is they hate they open their cards to foreigners, but they hate foreigners. The quality of the card or the production for the English commentary and stuff is terrible. It's dudes on Zoom calls. The volume's all over the place. There's lag on the commentary. And then I found out that you can watch in the Japanese stream outside of Japan, but it costs double what the English stream does. So if there's any more proof needed that they hate you, there it is. But they do have a couple of good fighters. Juan Archuleta lost hilariously, diving straight on Kleber Koika-Erbst and getting heel hooked. Classic Juan. Kyoji Horiguchi versus Sergio Pettis was the main event. Honestly, Horiguchi looked a bit timid, I thought. Was going to the jab into post-single that he was using in the first fight. I talk about this all the time because Frankie Edgar used to do it. He'd jab, body jab, duck in as if to body jab, slam his lead hand into the shoulder and pick up the lead leg. And Koji's doing that, except he's jabbing into the head and just pushing through. So he stayed on top of Pettis for 2 rounds, and then Pettis timed a counter fairly decently and dropped Kyoji in the 3rd. Kyoji came back. Pettis didn't look like he was in the fight at all up until that one counter, and after that counter he didn't really look like he was in the fight, but wasn't a great look for Kyoji. I mean, he was fighting very safe to just get this one back in the win column. Crazy to have a 3-round main event in this day and age, though. when they're only doing 5 minutes. If they were still doing that first round 10 minutes and then 2 5-minute rounds, that'd be more understandable. But the other guy I said to look out for was Karshiga Duitbeck, who was on a 5-fight knockout streak coming into this, picked up a 6th here, knocked the guy down with a left hand to the head. The commentators are saying, oh, did he make a mistake with that attempt at a walkaway knockout? And halfway through them saying that, he hits him with a left hand to the body, southpaw left hook to the liver. You see the guy's ribs go in and bounce back, and he just collapses. I love this guy. Everything he throws looks like it just really hurts. So that was the week. It was really good fun outside the UFC, and the stuff in the UFC wasn't too terrible either. This weekend we got a fairly decent UFC event. Perez versus Tyra. Alex Perez fighting for the third time in like 3 months. Ikram Alascarov's fighting against someone we don't really know. Josh Van's on the card. Still on like a 5-fight winning streak, I think. And I may have jumped the gun when I called this pretty good. But there'll be other stuff on. So, sign up to Patreons to listen to the podcasts. And I think I'm going to write a Peyton Talbot study because I quite like him. He's very flawed, I will say that. He's got the big hair, and his big hair sort of hides how much he gets hit. Some people have hair like Charlie Brenneman, who had this sort of poker straight hair in a really long style, where every time he hit, the hair went with it and showered everyone with sweat. But I do like Peyton Talbot. He does some very interesting things, and I'll probably write something about him either for next week or the week after when he fights. So if you want to get in on all that, sign up to the Patreon, be a boy, support the podcast. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. Don't forget, I wrote a How Islam Makhachev Defended the Title article, and I also wrote before that, Max Holloway Master Study, The Back Kicks. I'm your boy, Jack Slack. Nasruddin Imavov's Musashi-like slumped shoulders bless.